We've all made them, and while not everyone's bad decisions end up on the front page of the newspaper, sending major policy initiatives offside or derailing their futures, nobody likes to pick the wrong course of action. So tonight we explore what goes into making bad decisions and what can help avoid them. With us to consider that, in the nation's capital, David Moscrop. He is the author of Too Dumb for Democracy: Why We Make Bad Political Decisions and How We Can Make Better Ones. He's also a postdoctoral fellow in communications at the University of Ottawa. From our studio at Queen's University in Kingston, Ariel Saltzman, Associate Professor of Islamic and World History at Queen's. And here in our studio, Amanda Galbraith, Principal at Navigator Limited, and Steve Jordaens, Professor, Psychology at University of Toronto Scarborough. And we are delighted to have you two here in our studio in Toronto and our friends in Points Beyond for a discussion about what constitutes a good decision versus a bad decision. Steve, you're going to get us started here. We need a good psychology professor to get us going. Define a bad decision for us.
Well, I mean, a decision is largely judged by its consequences. What does it lead to? And when people are trying to make a good decision, that's largely the game they're trying to do, is look into the future, try to understand the impact that various decisions will have and how they will all play out. It's a very complex thing to do. We are probably the only animal that tries to do that, looks into the future that far. And because it's complex, we often get things wrong.
Well, I'd like Ariel Saltzman to come in here and help us look back through history. Let's take the most obvious ones out of the mix, like Chamberlain's appeasing Hitler in the late 1930s, which helped precipitate World War II. Take the two world wars out of it. Give us some examples in history of some really bad decisions.
Well, I think, as historians, we frequently talk about counterfactuals and agency and individual agency. But obviously, the people who have the most potential for doing great wrongs and doing great rights are those very high up in the food chain in power. And so in terms of, great bad decisions, I would say, it's not just the individual, it's actually collective governments. And I think one of the ones that we sort of miss are the decisions that were taken in the 1980s overall. The 1980s was when we were first becoming really aware, thanks to NASA scientists, that the globe was warming. At the same time, we were approaching that date, 1989, of course, when the wall came down in the Eastern Bloc. And so choices were made then to basically spread through what has been called shock doctrines, capitalism throughout the world, and not address the looming existential crisis of climate change and global warming. And I think that now when we're starting to judge what went wrong, what are the decisions that were made that were absolutely wrong, I think we have to take our cues from the doomsday clock that was just unfortunately moved forward to less than 2 minutes to midnight by the Union of Concerned Scientists. And they list these two factors, continued nuclear buildup, and of course, the withdrawal of the United States from two major treaties, not just that one with Iran, but also the Intermediate Range Missile Treaty. And the second is the accelerating pace of climate change, which is we see in Australia.
That's a pretty good list to get us going here. Amanda, in your experience, having worked for politicians, having worked for clients in the private sector, what tends to go into a really bad decision? What are the factors that are at hand when you've seen bad decisions made?
I mean, it's interesting, right? From a corporate perspective, often what happens is you're getting people managing up. So it's real on the ground, it's really bad. But I'm going to tell my boss 75% how bad it is, and he's going to tell his boss 75% of his version of it. So by the time it goes all the way up to the CEO, they get a very sanitized version of that. So you're having a whole crisis rolling in, and all of a sudden it's like a tidal wave that just blows them off the map. That's usually from like a structural issue. From sometimes you just get bad apples, so bad actors so good companies have people that do bad things, from embezzling to, and that happens quite a bit. And I think on the political side, it's a bit similar, right? You're running a government. At any point in time, people are going to do dumb things. They're not going to call people back. They're going to make mistakes. And it's how do you get access to that decision, the information about that bad decision to rectify it before it becomes a front page news story.
Can you take us, just briefly, you've worked for a number of politicians over the years. I know you don't want to embarrass anybody, but I mean, lots of time has passed by now. Give us an example of a decision which turned out, maybe at the time you thought it was a good one, but in the fullness of time, turns out to have been a bad one.
Yeah, that I've worked for, or that...
Preferably that you've worked for, because if I'm going to embarrass you, we really may as well go all the way here.
For sure. One actually comes to mind that was really challenging for I think for me and for the office I was at when I was working with the mayor, and it was around carding in the city of Toronto, right?
Is it Mayor John Tory?
Mayor Tory, yeah. And what happened was he first came in, and public opinion at the time was very much, this was before a lot of the Black Lives Matter and all this kind of stuff happened. They were very protective. The police and sort of a constituency was very protective of that. So the police were adamant that they needed this tool. And what happened was we didn't see that public opinion was shifting so quickly, and then you sort of get swept in the tide. The good thing that smart politicians do is they see that happening and they stand up and say, you know what, this was the wrong thing to do. I'm going to do the right thing and change my mind. One thing I always say to politicians and executives is flip-flopping is only a one-day attack that nobody cares about. People care about you doing the right thing, and I think that's an example of where we didn't see where the puck was going, but he fixed it in the end.
We'll come back to that issue about whether you should dig your feet into the sand, dig your heels in, or whether you should change your mind. We'll come back to that in a second. David Moscrop, how about you? Here in the province of Ontario, look as recently or as far back as you like. What's a political decision that was made that you think through the fullness of time turned out to be a really bad decision?
How much time do you have?
Well, it's an hour show, David.
Okay, good. Well, then we'll go an hour. Let's take the Doug Ford government and just recent events. I mean, in the early days of the Ford government, they came in like a wrecking ball and seemed intent on remaking the province overnight without much regard for public opinion, without much regard for consultation, without much regard for anything, as if they had a day to live. And so if you look at, for instance, autism funding or French language services and rights, French language university, the public service, these were decisions that were taken and later amended or reversed or put on hold. And it's a good example of how if you have a plan, perhaps a hasty one, and you set about it without thought or without consideration of what others might think, you get into trouble really quickly, especially if you take it on as a partisan project instead of, say, a deliberative project where you want to engage with those who agree with you and those who don't and the public at large to try to come to a good decision that everyone can live with.
Just in the interest of being even-handed here, since both examples we've given so far are by Conservative politicians, go back to the Kathleen Wynne years or the Dalton McGuinty years and pluck one out from the Liberals, if you would.
Well, let's say gas plants, just off the top of my head. We all know that story. Or Hydro One, for that matter. And you can see in these instances what politicians were getting at, and perhaps even a broader plan that would make sense. But then you see the execution being bungled, and you see that as it compounded, they effectively doubled down on bad decisions and led to a lot of trouble. And part of that is the institutions that we have. We have a partisan political system. We have a 24-hour news cycle. Politicians are constantly bombarded and they're risk averse. And so we've set things up to be even more difficult than they necessarily have to be, because when you do make a mistake, your inclination isn't to be open and forthright and to try to fix it. It's to try to hide it and move on with your life and hope you don't get busted.
Steve, let's go back inside to the psychological angle on this again, which is when you're making a decision, good, bad, or indifferent, what's going on cognitively in your head?
Well, it's a big answer to a quick question, too. There's two psychologists, Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman, who won a Nobel Prize looking at decision-making. And they talk about how we make over 2,000 decisions a day, according to most psychologists. A lot of those are governed by very quick, what we call heuristics. We go with the familiar. So a lot of decisions, we don't deliberate very deeply at all.
You decided to put that tie on today.
Exactly.
Took no time at all.
And it just sort of reached and, that'll work with what I'm wearing. And exactly, very quick. Occasionally we make these deep deliberative decisions, which is I think what we're really talking about today. And those are the ones that count, where we know that there could be consequences that are important to us. And that's where the intelligent person tries to get as much information as possible, which includes as many perspectives as possible, to try to assemble a group around a table that may be thinking about things or valuing things that I might not naturally think about or value. And so if these people are comfortable bringing this up, which is another psychological issue, often introverts at a table will not bring things up during a discussion, but will want to bring some ideas forward later. So how do you get all that input? But to have the ultimate good decision to kind of, contrast with what makes a bad decision, that's it. Getting lots of perspectives and seeing lots of people talk about how these consequences could play out, and then, rationally going from there.
The impression would be, of course, that if you
I
have
could interrupt just for a second.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Sorry,
Go
Steve.
ahead, Ariel, go ahead.
No, because I think that when we're talking about decision making, we don't remember the deep institutional and economic forces that are at work. There's a great degree of inertia, for example, in the policies toward the Alberta bitumen fields that go from one party to another, so that there's really no change. In fact, we're continuing as Canadians to subsidize this, very toxic industry. So I think there's ways in which there's a lot less freedom of movement in making these kind of major decisions, which from a historical point of view are going to have enormous consequences. And the consequences, of course, are all around us right now. On the other hand, and I think this is very true if you look at the current administration, the Trump administration, they're actually averse to experts, and they're averse to reality, in fact, and they surround themselves with a political culture that will support it. So beyond Trump's, and I would be very interested to hear what some of your guests have to say about his particular psychology or approach to decision making, but beyond that, there is a culture surrounding him that enables what he does, and when he makes what seems to be, erratic decisions, such as the assassination of a leading general and a war hero in Iran, Qasem Soleimani, these are not so arbitrary as we think, and the people around him are facilitating those decisions. So I think we should also look at the milieu and the deep inertia of our institutions and our economic relations, as well as the kind of things that bolster our militarism. Our militarism, when you have a country, that over almost half the world's major arms manufacturers and military manufacturers in the United States, you can see that, as Eisenhower said so many years ago in '61, that you have this military-industrial complex that is making decisions for itself, in effect.
Well, I was going to get to Donald Trump later, because how can we not talk about Donald Trump?
Okay.
But since you've raised him, why don't we do this right now? Okay, Sheldon, you want to bring this up? We're at the top of page 3 here. Donald Trump's approval rating is currently sitting at roughly 43%, which is basically where it's been for almost all of his presidency. Interestingly enough, if you want to compare, that is just 2% lower than where Barack Obama was at this point, in other words, 3 years in, of his presidency. And that is despite the fact that Trump, of course, has been impeached and done a lot of crazy things over the last 3 years. Now, the authors of Mistakes Were Made But Not By Me explain that 43% continuing support for Trump is explainable thus. Let's bring this graphic up. How does a person justify support for an unpresidential president? Easy. If you were on the fence about him, you are likely to jump over it to his side now, because after all, you voted for him. And if you voted for him, you want your vote to be consistent with your feelings about him today. Thanks to the cognitive biases that ensure that people see what they want to see and seek confirmation of what they already believe, you now, post-election, are motivated to focus on what you like about him and dismiss what you don't like. Let's get into that. David, where does that put us today, if that's in fact the case?
Oh, it's where we've always been. The fact is that the United States is not just polarized among partisan lines, but that partisan polarization is identity-based. You don't vote Republican or Democrat. You don't support the Republicans or Democrats. You are a Republican or Democrat. It's bound up with who you are and with your identity and with your well-being. And so there's always going to be 30x% of Americans who support the Republicans and 30x% of Americans who support the Democrats, no matter what. And the battle is over the independents. And as the excerpt you just read shows, we're deeply biased. We're cognitively wired to feel good, to avoid feeling bad. And partisan politics plays to that, and people know that. I mean, partisan actors know that extraordinarily well, and they exploit that. And that becomes embedded in our institutions, and then we're off to the races. So I wouldn't, for instance, be surprised to see Donald Trump, no matter what he does, reelected in 2020. And then, we'll just have to battle it out for another 4 years.
Amanda, how do you see it?
I see he's going to be reelected in 2020 for sure. Yeah, I think part of that is good to like take Soleimani, the assassination, for example. That was arguably a bad decision from a global perspective, that it was unsettling. From a political perspective domestically, it was a good decision for him, right? He's been doing tours all over the country, like, rallies saying he's got the bad guy. So I think that is the lens from which he's making decisions. So I think, Trump is erratic, but for us to dismiss him as being frankly unintelligent or unsophisticated, I think is an error.
Steve?
If we actually kind of go back and say, okay, before the confirmation bias sets in, which is surely a strong force, why did those 40% resonate with Trump in the first place? And when I think of Trump, I think of never wrong, always strong. That it's his cardinal sort of feature. If you kind of try to define him, that's what he presents himself as. And I think to a lot of people who felt sort of weak and they didn't have a strong voice and things were happening to them, being victimized by immigration or whatever they might think, that was the basis of their original decision. That guy is strong, and he's going to stand up for America, how I think of America. And that emotional basis, not necessarily a deep, thought-out, cognitive, weighing of evidence and values and all this, but no, I like that guy. He makes me feel good. He makes me feel strong. That can be a very powerful beginning of a decision. And then once that decision is made, then absolutely we have all these forces that make us want to feel like we are not stupid.
It's interesting that when Jimmy Carter, 40 plus years ago, sent 8 helicopters over to rescue the hostages, 6 of them broke down. Yep. And from that moment on, Carter was somehow seen as weak.
Yep.
And he never recovered from that.
Yep.
Amanda, let me try this one here. Some politicians...
Well, can I just enter into this Trump discussion, because I think it's kind of interesting that we often forget. Yeah, that he wasn't elected by the majority of Americans. He actually lost the general election. He was elected by the Electoral College. And secondly, one can't dismiss the fact that racism played a huge role, and that racism is targeting new immigrants to the United States, sure, there was discontent. There's also a toxic masculinity that he taps into, a sort of id, and that I was wondering some of the psychologists would weigh in on. And these are things that have kept him going. But surprisingly, actually, the polls are showing that a majority certainly want to hear more about what's going on and the crimes that he committed. If they're not crimes, then the indiscretions and the assault on democracy that he committed that warranted this impeachment. So I think, I don't think we can be so confident that Trump base is going to carry him over the threshold in the next election. And I think it's more for the Democrats to lose, actually, by fighting among themselves and bashing the forerunner, who is currently Bernie Sanders, has the best chance of beating Trump. Than for the Trumpers to again get him elected. In fact, I think the whole situation with the Republicans is a last-ditch effort, because the whole demography of the United States is changing, and they're not going to get reelected. They can't get reelected on their merits, so they have to cheat. And that's the cheating we see going on from local elections all the way up to the top with Trump himself.
Steve Jordan's once in.
Just to add a little complexity to that, I think. When you come to an election, there is the decision, which is the election. But then there's other sub-decisions, like, do I bother to go out and vote? And, if you're asking me what's going to happen in 2020, I think that's the question. How many people get motivated on either side? Will the Trump base win the day? Well, unless the other side does not get more motivated to come out in greater numbers, because she's right, they didn't necessarily win, but they won by the Electoral College because they got their base out to vote. So what makes somebody decide, I'm going to bother to do something? It's worth my time to do it, and that's a whole sub-decision.
Let me see, Amanda, I want to get you in on this, because if you've been in politics for any length of time at all, you are going to see your share of good decisions and bad decisions. It just comes with the territory. I'm interested in why the electorate decides to forgive some politicians for bad decisions, i.e. Justin Trudeau, blackface, brownface, which 5 days after that broke, disappeared, and the public obviously decided to forgive him, and he won. And why they decide to crush others, on the other hand. Do you know what goes into all of that, Stu?
Part of it is believability, right? So nobody believes Prime Minister Trudeau is racist. Like, nobody did. So that behavior is not ringing true to me as a person. Also, it was interesting. I was actually not at work at the time, so I was not immersed in the day-to-day politics of it. One of my family members, who's about 70, was like, "Oh, well, everybody did that back then," and I was like, "Everybody did not do that back then. In fact, people were being kicked out of university for things like that." So I think part of it is people's willingness to excuse behavior when it isn't fitting a pattern, versus, so Trudeau didn't have a pattern of that, so they were willing to kind of say, brush that off, that's not a big problem, versus what you saw with, for example, the Ford government, when they were elected on the idea that they were going to clean up the mess, no more privileged appointments, no more fancy fat cat liberal stuff, and then you have this appointment scandal one after another, and they got punished much more so than I think a liberal government would have been done for the same thing.
David, do you want to add to that? How does the electorate decide whom to forgive and whom to crush, and why?
Well, part of it is partisan identity again. If you looked at some of the numbers in the early days of the blackface, brownface scandal, you'd seen that conservatives sure cared a lot. Liberals were more willing to forgive, and the NDP was sort of somewhere in the middle. So there's always the fact that we're going to try to delude ourselves into explaining away bad behavior of people we like, while doubling down and pushing forward on those we don't like. Because again, we like the people we like and we dislike the people we dislike. And of course, the other thing is that it depends on what the misdeed is. For instance, people, they can understand liars, but they really don't like hypocrites. So you often find that if there's an expectation built into you being good, and you fall from all the higher height, then you land hard and sometimes fatally. And so part of it is whether or not it's a lie, and people say, look, all politicians lie, or it's hypocrisy, and people say, well, you're not the person I thought you were, and I don't trust you anymore. But of course, that goes back to what was just said. It also depends on who you are and how you sell it. Justin Trudeau is remarkably good at selling. And some other people, for instance, Doug Ford, maybe aren't. So there's a bunch that goes on, and it depends on the individual, but it certainly depends on how the politician is able to meet the public as well.
Steve? Just to jump on the selling point, I think this is a complex thing, and when we hear someone speak, when it comes to truth telling and truth thinking, we're looking more at their body than we are listening to their words. We're looking at how they present the information. In the famous Hugh Grant situation, when he had to apologize for a really bad decision at that time, he was found to have been wearing a too small suit on Jay Leno when he was apologizing, which makes you fidget, makes you uncomfortable, makes you pull your legs down, and it makes you look nervous and like you feel like an idiot. And so he probably was putting it on. But when it comes to a Justin Trudeau or a Ford, I think we're looking, and we're kind of doing that computation in the background. Does it seem like somebody has said, go out in front of the cameras and do this, but the person isn't really there? Or does it seem, and Trudeau is good at apologizing, and he has that authenticity to what he says, and whether that is authenticity or he wears it well, he certainly wears it well, and that makes us tend to believe somebody more than their words, their behavior.
For those of you who are under 40 and don't know what he's talking about with Hugh Grant, Google it. I am not going to repeat it on this program here. Anyways, Amanda, I want to return to that notion you brought up a while ago about when you get in the middle of a bad decision. Do you dig in, or do you change your mind and see what transpires after that? And, let's just take Doug Ford's government himself. He's had some pretty high-profile changes of position. Holding tough on autism and then switching the minister and making a very different decision. Sticking with his chief of staff and then firing his chief of staff after the patronage scandal that you referred to. Trying to get his friend Ron Tavener appointed the OPP commissionership, then realizing, this isn't going to go so well, standing down, putting somebody else in who has much more widespread appeal. Let's try this. Is there a general rule about when to double down on a bad decision? And when to basically say, okay, we've screwed this up, we better change our minds?
In politics or in corporate?
Politics.
There is not a general rule. I'd say ideally in the world, you don't want to make the bad decision in the first place. But once you find yourself in the middle of it, I think one thing, in politics, you have to watch public opinion and you want to watch caucus, right? And frankly, caucus is pretty critical. If you start to lose them, then you've lost the plot and you've lost your leadership.
Which Premier Ford was starting to lose.
Which is when you start to move, right? Yeah. And that's often, frankly, politicians will withstand the hue and cry of public opinion, I think, quite a bit more than they will a caucus being up in their ear, which is one thing I've experienced, or counselors, if you may. But I think good politicians actually don't dig their heels in for long, right? I think that's actually an interesting strength of the Ford government, in my perspective, is yes, they were relatively inexperienced in politics, but when they made some decisions that were not wise. I don't think you're seeing that now, but they were actually willing to change their mind and revert, and most places don't. Look at the gas plant scandal, for example. Look at SNC. I mean, federally, they dug their heels in so long. That should not have been a 6-month story. That should have been a 1 week, 2 week story. And that is what extends it, and that's what damages your brand.
Ariel, there was a...
no, just again
can I throw a question at you first?
We're talking about bad decisions, but we're not talking about the penalties for people who make good decisions. So, I mean, I think that, one of the great decisions of the early of this century was Jean Chrétien's refusal to go along with the Bush administration in going into Iraq. But taking those decisions is obviously, I think, much harder to do and to stick with them than making a bad decision and flip-flopping later. And so, while we're looking at the contortionism of Doug Ford and various other people, I think, for Obama to stick with the Iran deal, despite both sides, Democrats and Republicans, going after him, for Chrétien, and then, of course, undermine later. But I don't think we make enough of the difficulty of making right decisions and sticking by them.
Okay, David, in your view, do you have a sort of a sense about when is a good time to dig your feet in and when is a good time to change your mind?
Well, I mean, on the cynical strategic side, I mean, the advice is, of course, manage the people around you and manage public opinion to the extent that you can. And I think, again, the institutions that we've created incentivize that. So I don't blame politicians who do that, business leaders who do that, anybody who does it. It's the world we've created. On the other hand, it is worth every so often to search your own soul, to think deep about what you might have done wrong or not done or done too much of, and then to revisit it. I mean, if you're getting feedback, and especially negative feedback about something, the world might be trying to tell you something useful, and perhaps you should listen to it and make a change of heart, because it's true. And take for instance Jean Chrétien deciding not to go into Iraq. That was in part because caucus was divided, the country wasn't all for it, but he believed it too. So it's worth looking not just around you, but also inside a little bit and thinking about what it is you believe and why you believe it. But that doesn't mean you're not going to get slammed for it, because we live in a cynical, difficult, and partisan world.
Amanda, I don't know if you know Paul Rhodes.
Yeah.
You do know Paul? Mm-hmm. Okay, so like 25 years ago, he was an advisor to Mike Harris, common sense revolutionary, and his advice to politicians, and I guess it probably works for business people too, was, if you're in trouble, figure out where the story's going to end and go there.
Yep.
Is that still the best advice for people in the private sector too?
Yeah, you want to condense the negative news, right? Mm-hmm. So if you know you're going to have to apologize, if you know you're going to have to pay someone, if you know you're going to have to do that and do that quickly. I always say to clients, you want to own fair and reasonable. Mm-hmm. So yes, you've done something bad, or yes, you've made a huge mistake, but how can you get to fair and reasonable as quickly as possible, so when the media will move on, and frankly, the public will move on, and your customers or your employees, right? So,
you want to give us an example from your time in the private sector? You don't have to name names if it's embarrassing, but...
Sorry, I'm trying to think of one I can actually say publicly. So I'll just say example would be...
She's going to extend the news cycle on this.
Yeah,
story.
Exactly. An example would be they found an employee has acted inappropriately, right? And they're being investigated, and the police are going to announce that this has happened, which happens more frequently than you can imagine. How do you make sure that you are getting... you have to do an internal investigation, you have to discipline them, you have to make sure your employees, your customers. So ideally, once the news hits that person's been arrested, or you want to make sure you have your statement ready, you're out publicly, you've got internal. So all that should roll out ideally in like a 12-hour window max.
Get to the finish
before
line
and after,
quickly.
as quick as possible. Because with a 24-hour news cycle, we were talking about this actually before the break, things move on so fast that if you give everybody what they need to feel like the story is wrapped and done, and that this company's done the right thing, or you've done the best you can, people will move on. It's when they feel like there's still something there, or you're lying, or you're not being authentic, is people still dig at the story.
What goes, Steve, into a public forgiveness, if you like, of somebody who's made a bad decision?
Yeah, I mean, just one thing to carry on from the last one. One of the things we see from the Trump administration, there's so many things that I think psychologists are amazed by, and a lot of people are amazed by. One way to shorten the news cycle is to compress the story. Another one is to follow it with another story,
Yep.
and another story, and another story. And it's amazing how well that works. And if you're doing that second strategy, then you needn't apologize. And you know, that's one thing. So the apology can do exactly what Amanda says, is wrap a bow around the story and kind of tell reporters and the media, there's nothing else to see here. You got all the juiciness stuff. Find something else. And so that human ending is a nice way of ending it. But in some cases, when someone is like incapable of an apology, the other strategy sometimes works pretty well as well. And you know, we see that in all sort of situations where sometimes it's just deny, deny, deny. It's try to bury it, try to change it with another story, and that's, you know, a second strategy people use.
David, I got 30 seconds left, unfortunately, which is not enough time to give us a great answer, so I'll settle for a good answer. What goes into making better policy decisions for politicians going forward, as opposed to the bad decisions that they then have to bring crisis managers like Amanda into to clean up their mess?
Oh, that's easy. I'll give you a great answer in a few seconds. You deliberate. You don't just bash each other over the heads and at the end of the day put up your hand and vote. You sit down, you recognize the person across from you as an agent, as an interlocutor, as a subject in governance with you, and you talk about things. You exchange reasons, you exchange ideas, you respect one another, and then you try to come to a decision. And then if you have to, you bash each other over the heads and vote.
That seems like a very good checklist. Can I thank David Moskrop? For more on this, he is the author of Too Dumb for Democracy, Why We Make Bad Political Decisions and How We Can Make Better Ones. He's at the University of Ottawa. We thank as well Ariel Saltzman, the Associate Professor at Queen's University, for joining us on the line from Kingston. And here in our studio, Amanda Galbraith, the Principal at Navigator, and Steve Jordaens, the Professor of Psychology at University of Toronto, Scarborough. Good discussion, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.